Right. Wired up. Do you want to talk in advance?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I was going to let you hit the space bar and switch. Advance your slides.
Oh, yeah, I'll talk. I'll advance. We'll get started in just a sec. I was wondering how many people we have in this session. A few more than I thought. Thank you, guys.
I can't believe I'm still
Yeah.
Okay.
In theory, we are live to the universe.
Okay, we're live.
We can give it a minute or two here.
Okay.
And people.
Tell you what, it's 3. We'll give folks just a second to come in. 1 minute. Okay. We'll get started. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to the last session of the day. My name is Greg Wilson. I'm with Phase 2. This is Sean Mole. Sean's the strategic lead for OpenPublic. The way we're going to do this is I'm basically going to just open this up and give you an intro about OpenPublic and what's been going on, kind of the context of OpenPublic. And then I'm going to hand it over to Sean to do a much deeper dive to walk you. What we're going to talk about today is kind of the whole app. What are apps and should you care? Here in the DC metro area, we have other offices around the country. We're a digital technology agency. We do a lot in one of the distributions that we maintain for the open source community. That's just a quick stat sheet. So OpenPublic, OpenAtrium is another distribution. OpenPublish is a distribution that we've maintained over the last few years. That's not quite as active these days as OpenPublic and OpenAtrium, but just sort of the environment within our company around or out of which OpenPublic emerged, just to give you some context. So really quickly, these are just examples of federal, state, and local folks who are using OpenPublic. So this is at the federal level, of course, FEMA, DHS. Ready.gov is there. I don't think Ready was originally based on OpenPublic, but FEMA launched in late 2012 or late 2011, I think it was, and DHS.gov launched in the summer of 2012. So those were the most recent ones to launch on OpenPublic, or examples of OpenPublic launches at the federal level. The state of Georgia was the first state to fully migrate its entire CMS platform over to Drupal. They moved away from a vignette CMS platform. They selected OpenPublic and Acquia as their base platform to get away, like I said, from vignette. So that's a large statewide platform build. It's fully responsive, 80-plus sites. So it's a great example of the kind of thing that Sean is going to be talking about. Georgia, actually, we did not use apps there, but there was some apps work done behind the scenes. The County of San Mateo is actually the most recent government organization at the county level, of course, to launch onto OpenPublic. And they selected sort of a platform with apps architecture to be kind of the front and center the way that the new County of San Mateo Drupal platform works. So it's out there, it's live, it's a beautiful site, 20 or so county sites. So that's, like I said, the most recent incarnation of OpenPublic in government at the county level. Really quickly, just the background from which OpenPublic came. You guys are probably all familiar with these milestones. So OpenPublic was launched in early 2011 there in the middle. But the thinking of OpenPublic came out of really the work that the Obama administration and Vivek Kundra and those guys launched when they came into office. WhiteHouse.gov was launched onto Drupal in late 2009, so that, of course, was a huge shot in the arm for open source and government and Drupal. The Open Government Initiative was launched in, I think it was December 8th, if I remember right, of 2009. And then in 2012 was the digital government strategy, which Tom Erickson talked about this morning, and some of the shared platform principles that came out of that. So anyway, OpenPublic didn't emerge sort of from accident. It was a result of a lot of the thinking that had gone into open government, and just making it easier to build good government sites. So this is a snippet from the digital government strategy. There were 4 strategy principles, and these were actually talked about in this morning's keynote. So the one that OpenPublic sort of hits squarely in the head is the shared platform approach, which the digital government strategy called out just to try and make it easier for government agencies to share information not only within one government agency, but across agencies. So we think that Drupal and the idea of shared CMSs is a great example of what the digital government strategy was trying to put forward with the shared platform approach. So people use OpenPublic in different ways. A lot of people will just download OpenPublic just to see how Drupal works if they haven't, or their teams haven't used Drupal yet. There's a lot of stuff you get when you download OpenPublic. You can go to openpublicapp.com. You can download it. You get a ton of demo content out of the box, which actually is quite useful when it comes to just trying to get a face onto Drupal. What is a Drupal site? What could a Drupal site really look like? Just having demo content in your install helps you get a handle on how actually Drupal works. A lot of people use OpenPublic to evangelize open source. If they've got their management team is not quite familiar with what Drupal is or how a Drupal site might look, especially for a government agency, OpenPublic is a pretty beautiful out-of-the-box distribution. The last two, there are some people will use OpenPublic as a template to get started with their site. Others will use OpenPublic like those examples that I just gave, like especially the state of Georgia and the county of San Mateo will use OpenPublic as the base distro for their entire path forward for building government sites. So just different ways that people are using OpenPublic. Who in the room is familiar with what a Drupal distribution is? Okay, most everybody. I was debating on whether or not we wanted to spend any time on these slides. I'll go through these really quickly. But a Drupal distribution, there are many Drupal distributions out in the Drupal ecosystem. OpenPublic is a Drupal distribution, which is basically just a starting point for an industry-specific solution. It's a unique combination of modules, themes, configuration, and so on. So when you download Drupal from Drupal.org, what you get is a really powerful, flexible CMS, but it doesn't know what you want to use it for. So there's no menuing, there's no taxonomy, there's no sample content. So what OpenPublic does is it just provides an accelerator for making it easy, like I said, to build good government sites. So it's kind of a really possibly silly metaphor. This is a slide we put together just to really make it simple as to what a Drupal distribution is. Like I said, if you're not familiar with one, this is kind of the car example. So at the top you have like a V8 engine, and to that you could add Chrome, hardware, weld, and you can configure that to come out with any variety of different use cases. You get like a Ford F-150 or another sports sedan. So it's just the way that that engine is configured and what's added to it results in different use cases. That's the way you can kind of think about a Drupal distribution. You can download Drupal core from Drupal.org, and like I said, you get this really powerful, flexible CMS out of the box. There's no menuing, that kind of thing. So to that, you have modules, themes, and so on, and you can come out with, in OpenPublic's case, a government distribution, or if you're looking to build an e-commerce site, something like Commerce Kickstart. Like I said, the list of Drupal distributions goes on and on and on. So hopefully that makes sense for those of you who aren't really familiar with what a Drupal distribution is. I'm going to go past that. Okay, there we go. So this was dhs.gov. OpenPublic site. There is a team behind OpenPublic at Phase 2. This is the team, especially the top 3 folks here, one of whom you recognize, that's Sean Moll, the OpenPublic strategic lead, but we have a project manager, Felicia Haynes, and Eric Summerfield. So there is a team dedicated to the care and feeding of OpenPublic, so they're all super excited about the OpenPublic 1.0 launch and apps. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sean Moll.
I bet Greg he couldn't get through like 20 slides in less than 10 minutes, and I apparently owe him a beer. So, OpenPublic and apps. Today, if you don't know, we released for public consumption RC1 and then rapidly RC2 and RC3 yesterday. And we want to talk about apps. We want to talk about why apps and what they want to do and why this sort of fulfills the OpenPublic vision. The promise of Drupal, like Greg had kind of said, is there's parts and labor. There's this pieces that come together on top of this engine through what we call the contrib space of modules and things that allow us to build sites and build functionality. The reality is those modules come in all different shapes and sizes. There are modules as small as date formatters, small as adding widgets that you need to do content entry that aren't really a big piece of functionality. And yet, the other piece that we end up having and we need is the assemblage of those pieces. Like Greg said in that slide, which I actually really like, it's the way you put it together that makes a Drupal site a Drupal site. One of the challenges we've had with OpenPublic, and you saw we built FEMA, we've built DHS, we've built Georgia, we've built San Mateo, we built for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, we've built Wilson Center, I actually always forget a bunch. We've built a bunch of these sites, and one of the problems with the Drupal distribution that's really feature-rich, that really has a lot in it, is that if you don't want pieces of it, too bad. This is a problem with any distribution, and one of the benefits of OpenPublic has been, as Greg said, we can evangelize with it. Unlike regular Drupal, if you've ever installed to show somebody, you spend 2 hours, you get a nice white screen, you get the blue Drupal droplet up in the left-hand corner, in the profound sense that you just wasted 2 hours of your life. Unlike that, if you install a distro, any one of the distros built on Drupal, and you want to show it to somebody, you turn it on and you actually have functionality. You have menus, if they did a good job with the distro, like OpenPublic, there's sample content, looks like a website. It explains to people who don't understand what something like Drupal is, what's possible. We don't want to lose that. But we don't necessarily want to have to fight Drupal when we go to build with it. We want to be able to pick individual pieces of functionality that are tailored for the space we're in. And that's where we get apps. You can see this is a working screenshot of the OpenPublic App Store. All the ones that are little red chiclets are part of RC1. Some of the apps that we had already and existed were there. You can see the OpenPublic Projects app, OpenPublic Password. Right below it you can see the actually much stronger FSMA compliant OpenPublic Security. Ideation, and then third-party apps. You can see in this screenshot the Lingotech app, which is one of the translation apps for OpenPublic. Each of these things represents like a little piece of functionality, and that's what's really great about this. If you've tried to build with OpenPublic in the past and you were like, oh, it was really tough. I had to go override some defaults, and I had to play with features, and I had to do a bunch of overrides, and I couldn't get rid of the default content types that I didn't want. That is not the case anymore. We now have this apps module. I want to talk a little bit about, what it is. Before I do that, I actually want to show you guys just a little bit of OpenPublic if you haven't seen it before or seen it before today. I think this video is going to be playing in just a second. It's hard when you take a video of a static screen, you're leaving yourself time to talk, and you're like, is that video playing? But in a second, if it starts to scroll, I'll know it's playing. Yeah. Maybe not. So this is OpenPublic. And there we go. It does actually play. All right, go back. So this is OpenPublic, and if you haven't seen it, there's my scrubber. If you haven't seen it before, it sort of is a best of breed sort of collection of a bunch of things. And I like to show off the home page as a really lovely way to get at it. And actually, since the network is working, let me see if I can just jump out and show you guys. We're going to go live for the demo. I hadn't trusted the Wi-Fi, but apparently the Wi-Fi is better than Keynote. So if you haven't seen OpenPublic before, let's just take a look. This is an OpenPublic install. This is one of the RC1 demos. If you've been wandering around, you can see it. And it's got a whole bunch of various tools that are sort of familiar to us as web tropes, sort of best practices. We've got our slider, rotator, our carousel at the top. Able to expand and accommodate lots and lots of things. We have, a carousel for resources. All this stuff can be turned off. And then we have a lot of automatic curation. built into the homepage. And if we click around, we can see there's actually a lot in here. This is a fully loaded OpenPublic site. This actually has all the apps turned on, as demonstrated by the overflowing menu of goodness. And you kind of jump in here and see that, we've got a lot of things that people need. 80-20 rule. I've yet to work on a public sector website, state, local, governments, federal, that didn't need press releases. So we have a really nice press release gallery. We're going to talk about how that's potentially a little bit nicer in just a bit. We have like a staff directory as part of Open Government. You might want to put points of contact out there, trustworthy faces for people to acknowledge the organization. There's Honest Abe. Got some cross-linking. We'll come to this in a second. You might notice Abe has a blog post sort of shown on his profile, whereas we can go back and see that some of our contributors here are maybe a little less involved in Open Government. No, Lyndon Johnson came through for us. So there you go. And you can see all this interrelated content, all this stuff, very basic website stuff. Unless you're building a very small website, you're probably going to need to add features to it. But it's all there. The ability to sort of do right rails, sidebars, language support. Like I alluded to Lingotech, there's also sort of manual translation available as an app. Different forms of security, all that good stuff. But this site is a fully loaded site. This is a site with all the apps turned on. I want to step back for 1 second and sort of orient you guys to the app screen here. Brilliant. I was very skeptical the Wi-Fi was going to work. I shouldn't have been. So here you go. This is the app screen. This is actually where we are. And if I drill in here, I can actually kind of see any of these little apps jump into, say, content translation, which I just alluded to. It's actually not turned on yet. I could actually go ahead and install it. Go ahead and install it. What bad will happen? And you can actually see that this is actually setting up, downloading, updating the database, doing all the necessary things in the background for me. And then it's an RC1, so we get a lovely error. That's actually an error in the apps module. No cell phones? And if I come back, I can kind of see, jump into my app and jump into my config screens, which is really good. So what we've got there is fully loaded website. I want to jump back there. All the apps have been turned on. I just added translation. We can kind of talk about that if people want after. But this is actually how OpenPublic comes now if you decide to turn on nothing. And I actually wanted to show you guys the inflection points in the arc for how do I use this apps model? How does it actually make my website work? So in my attempts to tempt fate as much as possible today, I'm going to install some Drupal right now. This is set up on our dev cloud. This website, this is install.php. It's been sitting waiting for me for an hour and a half. This is actually RC3. And I'm taking it on faith that Eric would not set me up a site that didn't run. If you've ever installed, this should look familiar. The first, I'm sorry I didn't pause. I wanted to. The screen that's going to come up. Sort of option old school apps, open public projects, open public security. You can see there's some instructions there. All of the created. So blog entry, breaking news. If you're familiar with OpenPublic, we haven't changed any of the features yet, mostly. We fixed some bugs, so there's a couple things that are different. But these are really about having these things broken out and set up in such a way that you can actually turn them off and on. And so This is your first kind of inflection point when you're using OpenPublic now, where you can decide what your content strategy is, you can decide what your IA is, you can decide how fast you want to go on this particular site. One of the things that I think is a huge success metric for this strategy, Greg alluded to Open San Mateo, or San Mateo County, which had the first version of OpenPublic 1, Open San Mateo. They actually had about 27 sites that we were going to transfer for them and migrate. And they were replacing an old CMS. When they wanted to spin up a brand new site, it was $10,000 in 1 week of labor just to get the site turned on in the old proprietary CMS that I won't name. And that situation was untenable. So a lot of agencies were like, if it's going to take me a week and $10,000, I can go spin up a WordPress site. I can actually just go to Network Solutions or web.com and actually just buy some static hosting and put up a handful of pages. The ability to turn these apps off, and the fact that we're partnered with Acquia and everything is set up, they can spin up a brand new site in less than 4 hours. They can turn off all these apps. They've actually started replacing all their microsites, WordPress sites, static sites, with Drupal-based sites on the code base that they're maintaining with their theme, with their core features in it. And that's what's really powerful here. So you can look at this list and say, I don't need special homepage features. I don't need facts. I don't need press releases. I can actually go through here and decide exactly what I need for the site. And know, as part of this apps thing, that if I change my mind later, I can just go in, like you saw me do earlier, and re-enable an app. Not a problem, not a very big deal at all. So you can see I'm sort of just like waving my mouse here in this video. I'm the best video recorder ever. And I'm going to come down here and say, in my indecision, I actually want a plain Jane install, and go ahead and just start unchecking all of the things that I could possibly have here. So you can see, like, OpenPublic Person, we were just looking at Honest Abe. Media Room uses panels. It's for various things. It's actually one of the least used features in OpenPublic. I could opt out of it right here. And I can just go and start and uncheck things. This is a really cool decision point. We really like this in the distro. And I'm going to see actually where our fully baked website is. Let me see. Well, that is the joy of
The demo god smoke.
the demo god smote me. That's okay though, because I actually have this other one set up. If I had actually gone through and gotten through my app install screen, I would have come through and said, turned off everything like you saw me do in the video, and come through to RC Demo 1, and it would be lovely and filled with magic. And I could go back in through and actually check the apps that I wanted. And the thing I really like about this is, for instance, let's see how much more fate I can tempt today. You saw that I had a feature, homepage, no homepage, the OpenPublic homepage. Beloved by all of us, ABC agency announces up to $50 million in fuel cell research. If you can believe it, I actually didn't need to read that. We can go ahead and actually turn on the content and opt in one app at a time to the content model we need. The other thing that's really exciting about this model, besides the ability to decide at that first inflection point, is to grow. So one of the really common things we see in our platform site builds, and we've seen this on Georgia, and we've seen this in San Mateo already, in part accelerated due to the ease of this apps model, is you're building a platform and you're building a lot of best practices in. And a lot of people don't go live. It's really common for us when we build big public sector websites off old CMSs and we do a big migration, say 6,000 pieces of content, we migrate everything into site page. You know, the most basic Drupal content type. Because if your old CMS didn't have any structured data, you didn't have any events, all you had were pages with attachments attached to them, that's what your site is. But as you go on, if you have the functionality to say, let people start blogging. If you have a workflow that's in the system that allows you to actually distribute content creation to other people, one of the most exciting pieces of the site story. See if the demo gods are shining on me today. Boom, I have some stuff here. So let's actually really, the State Department tweets are the first thing that comes up. Let me use Context UI. Actually see if I can add some stuff here. This is using context and boxes for those of you that don't know. And I can actually just go through here and make a lovely slide. And this is all features that I just turned on. I'm actually going to reference the President's Memorandum on Transparency and Open Government. I'm going to give it a catchier title here. I know you guys wanted to watch me go through and find some images. Oh, man. Sorry, there is nothing as fun as using your own computer at a distance. There we go. That looks like a perfect slide photo for that. Go ahead and choose that. Go ahead and upload it. That's actually my son, who I try and work into every demo. I could add another slide item here. I think you guys probably get the idea, so I'll just pull one from my very small library of demo content, because I basically just turned this site on. And I've got my rotator. That was the gray bar you saw at the bottom. It looks a little interesting because I'm in the admin interface right now and a bunch of stuff is going on. But go back, done, save changes. I enabled some very real, very interesting features there. I've got my memo on transparency with a baby in a snowsuit. And I've got my Open Government Directive featured. And if I wanted to, I could keep going back and editing my homepage, all in homepage feature. And this uses context UI. But this is that app, we just turned it on. And we can actually start building out curation of content. So I could come back in, I could be like, oh, well, I actually need a couple other things here. Let me see here. I actually don't need powered by Drupal, though I might want to think about powered by Drupal. And yeah, that's fine. You guys kind of get it. Could add a new Twitter box if I wanted. And on and on and on we go. I go ahead and click done and go ahead and stop editing layout. And so I'm starting to build out my homepage. I might want to work on it a little more. This may not be production ready. But this is all out of that homepage app I just turned on. None of those features, none of those boxes and things were in there. And so it really is more than a module. You saw actually there a bunch of things working in concert, along with some demo content, boxes, beans, entities, a whole technology tool stack that gives you like homepage, drag and drop custom configuration. I could go ahead and come back here and say that I want that breaking news feature and go ahead and enable that app. And actually slowly build out a homepage that looks a lot like this particular homepage. So on our fully baked app, but I can pick one at a time. And that's all kind of out of that one particular app. Node, ABC Agency. 5 recent ABC Agency achievements you should know about. Breaking news, classic feature, kind of built right in there. And I'm waiting for that to turn on. So hopefully you guys are getting some of the juice that goes into the apps model here. Coming back to my, whoops, back to Keynote. Some of the other stuff I'll just really quickly here sort of show off sort of a content type. Unless you guys really want. And you can kind of see that you can sort of select all of the things that you want. The other piece here that I kind of want to show really quickly, so you can see just 2 content types. This is an even cleaner site than the one I was working on. This is the one I was just working on earlier today. I can go ahead and turn on the document app. Same deal, content type. That's the head of Karen Borchert. Everybody hurrah for test content. Go ahead and click Enable App. Kind of the same deal here, where you're going in, you're actually turning on an individual silo of functionality. This is a good moment to stop and talk about what goes into an app. So you've seen kind of what apps can do, and you've seen that it's more than one module. If you're thinking about building an app, we hope that you are, if you're a developer or an aspiring developer. Building on OpenPublic is actually built with features, which you can go learn a lot more about, same tool stack used with OpenAtrium. And the important piece is it's not just modules. It's modules and configuration and theme, like Gregory said. And ideally, if you're adhering to OpenPublic best practices, some demo content. And there's some ways to do that with OpenPublic. And all that together actually, boom, there we go. You can go and jump into configure. You can actually see that that demo content is something you can turn off and on. So it's not just that I actually just turned on and created a content type, and in the background the database was updated for this site, and I imported all the theming I needed and any of the dependent modules that weren't already on the site. I actually have this piece here in demo content that really makes it a full feature, something that actually is useful and interesting. Skip forward to my error message. It takes about 10 seconds when you do stuff to sort of for everything to update, and makes for a very boring demo. And now if I go in, I can see that I've got my document content type. Sorry, go back there. Actually, I'll just come back here. I was working on RC Demo 1 earlier. I've got my document content type, and you can see that one of the things we were talking about, the President's Memorandum on Transparency and Open Government, it's actually one of the pieces of demo content that's inside that module in that app, or it's inside a module inside that app. And if I go look, it's nothing special, but it's way nicer than having something that actually has very little substance to it and doesn't tell you what it is. And that's on right there, right by default. Sweet. Jump forward. The last piece of apps that we're extremely excited about are additive apps. So you've seen me turn on and off a lot of things that are basically silos. And that's not a bad way to think about apps. And it's the way ideation and Project Mapper works, where you turn this thing on and it gave you all this functionality and it worked in this particular way, but it was really not related to the rest of your website. So you'd have an additive app and it basically was this little silo of functionality that you would extend and hang on and tack onto your website. But it wasn't really easy to make content types that related to each other, that talked to each other, and that were still optional. And this was the hardest part for us about OpenPublic. We wanted some of those nice features, like it's normal on a website to see on an author's profile page what their last blog post was. You saw me do that with Abe earlier. It's normal to see that Lyndon Johnson's blog post on the page, right? Like that's a normal web kind of feature. So we want these content types and these structures to work together. It's intrinsic to the IA. It's kind of a best practices, user expectation. We want things to be able to turn on and actually extend each other. And before we sort of came up with the idea of additive apps and the technology that makes it work, called Features Template, this wasn't really possible. It was very, very difficult to build a system that was very flexible and could be extended. So I want to demo this really quickly. This is the Person app or the Profile app for OpenPublic, and I've already added it to a blog entry. You can see here I've got Honest Abe's blog post, and I'm going to go back. I already have one fully baked. Drupal does not like it when you can't. But I wanted to just show you here really quickly that this is the Abe's blog entry. And if I go to Abe's blog entry like you saw on the demo site earlier, you can see that I can jump to Abe's blog entry. I can see the second inaugural address. I can go look at Abe's profile page, and I can see the relationship there. Well, how do I do that? Because I already told you that Person and Blog are two totally separate apps. This is that power of additive apps. We've built this capability with Features Template to go ahead and go in and extend an existing application and an existing service with another thing. And I'm going to go forward. So if I come into the Person app down here, I can scroll down, go ahead, and this is my big list of apps. I can look at some of these. The one right now that is an extension app is Profile OpenPublic Person. Go ahead and jump into the details for that app. Go ahead and see it. Go ahead and click Configure. This is the first screen I think you guys have seen. I can show you some later if you want when we have questions. Oh, that's behind me. Sorry, I thought somebody was asking a question. If we go through and click Configure and wait for apparently the slowest person in the world. There we go, me. Very impatient. I should have just waited like 3 more seconds. There we go. This is what I wanted to show you guys. We actually have a list of other apps that can be extended by Person. So these are all of the person-aware apps, person-aware content types, I should say. Some of these are related to other content types in the site. With features template, we have a tool stack now that the app can actually scan your site, figure out what you have turned on, offer you the capability to extend it if we know what that thing is. In this case, it's a content type. Sometimes we extend taxonomy. Sometimes we extend search or social sharing. And you can see I just clicked resources. I went ahead and clicked save configuration, and then fast because I was talking and wasn't bored. You can actually see the green confirmation message. The configuration has been shaved. So what I just did is I went ahead and added to the resource the ability for that resource to know about people. And now when I go in to edit content type of that type, they know about people, they can display people, the relationship exists. This is really powerful. One of the really cool ways we use it on San Mateo is for location. Location is a tricky thing. Some people are really into location, some sites are really into locations, other things are not. The other thing that's interesting about locations is you kind of want it to function as an address book. You really don't want to be in a position where every single time you enter a location, you're like, oh, what's the street address for the meeting room across town that I need to go in at? Remember its name. So one of the apps we built for San Mateo with this additive app functionality was a location app. It basically creates a centralized address book for all the sites in their platform. Basically autocomplete, you start to type the name of the location, and boom, it fills in the address for you. You can then modify it, like if you want to add an extra room number or change something, you can go ahead and do that. When you create new locations, it gets added to the directory. The other cool thing is you can decide what a location should apply to. So you can add a location to events, which is recommended. It's nice to know where things are. But you can also add locations to press releases, and each of those sort of applications know how to use and deal with that location information if you decide to turn it on. It makes for a really great example, like person, of something that not everybody needs. Like not every agency wants really extensive location or calendaring. But if you do, you might want to be able to use it multiple places because you might want to add location to lots of the content in your site. And now with this additive apps model, you can. Super exciting. That is prepared. My understanding is I'm supposed to be done in 10 minutes. So I wanted to leave time for questions, and in particular for the demo sites, if you guys have stuff you want to see me see whether or not I can break. Yeah.
So the app stuff is specific to OpenPublic and is only in this distro?
The apps module is actually a freestanding module. It's maintained separately from OpenPublic, and that includes apps and app server. One of the things we haven't set up anything here this way is you can like have multiple app stores that you point to within the app module within a Drupal site. And you can also use the apps module to run your own app server. And it is maintained separately from OpenPublic. Obviously, we have a strong relationship, and we've put in some requests. You might really like the apps module. It's cool. There are definitely, as we've built out, we've realized there are some limitations.
This is yet another extension of Drupal.
Mm-hmm. Yep. This is definitely an extension of Drupal. Apps is built into OpenPublic. It's there. You can actually run a slimmed down app server based on Drupal if you don't want to run it outside of like an OpenPublic install. And yeah, I think that's it. Sorry, I'll repeat the next question.
The additive apps, is that basically you guys providing new hooks to feature to know that there are some relationships that are now apps?
Yeah, so the question is additive apps, do we add basically new hooks to the features so that you can know about that? Short answer is yes. Okay. It is basically the features template module, which is available now. I'm not a developer, so I cannot tell you where the hooks go, but yes, there are some hooks in there. We've also added some hooks around OpenPublic for like the config screens if you saw them, and I could jump into some of the more interesting ones here. Look at OpenPublic promotion. I randomly guessed this one may not have anything interesting on it. Also, it's not on. We also added some hooks, though, for the config screens. Let me go to the site where everything is turned on. We also added some hooks so that you can do some config screen stuff. Like, so we have some like practices if you dig into the apps to pull out of config. One of our goals on San Mateo and one of our goals with OpenPublic right now, and I will say RC1 isn't quite there in a couple of spots, is that if you're a site manager, you never have to go to Drupal configuration again. So there's a couple of different places where there were existing hooks that we're now using in a systematized way, and then features template is the really big new thing in the features tool stack that allows this additive app module. and it is available outside of OpenPublic. It's obviously part of the tool stack. But we, phase 2, as Greg said, also maintains Open Atrium. So we expect features templates to be a lot of places. We expect that to be of big interest to the community, even if you're not using apps.
I want to make sure this last question was clear. So this is an extension on top of Drupal insofar as apps is a contrib module, just like any
apps. Yeah, apps. Yeah, so that apps is a contrib module. I believe it's actually called apps server, and it's just in the contrib space. Same thing with features template. Yeah, Carla.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you handle the manual translation process?
I could. I would have to turn on one of the content translation apps, but let's see. So OpenPublic has, we'll see how this goes. It is given and it is taken away this morning. OpenPublic actually has 3 methods that we've done translation with. That is actually not a bad thing. That is an error in the apps module that's in the d.o Drupal queue. Did it turn it on though? God. So I'll try this one last time and then I might just jump to another site. We actually have 3 translation modules. I have a permission error on my demo site. We have 3 translation modules. One is Lingotech that hooks in very deeply with their translation services. 2, which we've used in Georgia and is probably going to get released as an app, is Google Translate, which is so-so. If you care about translation, it's less than so-so. And then the other one is the manual translation app. That is actually in Drupal 7. That's all wrapped up. It's a mix of node translation, but then also entity translation. Sorry. Fumbling through this. And it actually just exposes and sets up all the normal, I would say, Drupal translation best practices. It's got like a screen. It says, go here to translate strings, go here to translate, and then it adds the node translation ability for content. So that's an app that actually is on top of a giant module tool stack and still sort of uses underneath that all the regular Drupal things. So all the app really does is tie that all together, provide the necessary theming. And actually the video I was going to play, let me see if it'll play here, actually sort of shows that at work. And it actually goes ahead and does translations for all the views and things. We've worked, Lingotech actually was really helpful. They applied a patch that was generally really good to OpenPublic, rolled in several betas ago. All the views and things are exposed correctly in the interface and things like that now. So this demo, which I don't know why it didn't play in the keynote, but you guys are watching it now, sort of shows you this is an English site. I put a bunch of content in. You can see the language translator that's themed. I can go ahead and select a language, switch to Spanish, and this is actually pretty much how it works. One of the nice things about the manual content translation setup is that nodes exist separately. So this site has long since been taken down, but if I were to go through or go back to the beginning of that slide, you would see that there were different numbers of things in the rotators. So I have 5 in the English, and I've actually set up like 8 for the Spanish site. You can see that all the content was mixed. Some of it was translated, some of it was unique to each language. But yeah, we didn't actually build in anything that wasn't already in the contrib space in the case of the language module, or the language app, excuse me. We actually just made it all work together.
So what you're showing is the content,
Mm-hmm.
manual content.
Yeah, that was the manual content, that particular one. And that was all that was a test site we built and actually translated to the best of our ability. One of the team translated all the content, including all the block names. A lot of those are translated by default as part of demo content, but created all the different Spanish rotators. There's a lot of Spanish lorem ipsum, if that makes your head hurt, it should. And a lot of Spanish press releases and versions of content for that demo site.
So everything worked. I download and take over, create a Spanish language site, pretty much everything works.
Yeah.
I know it's not easy.
It's not easy to translate a site. As a matter of fact, I will say that demo you saw took about 2 days of prep and translation for somebody to do. So I will say that although the functionality is really good in Drupal at this point, it's mature, and we've used this on a bunch of different websites at this point, and learned a lot from that. Its translation is still, very laborious in Drupal. because I shouldn't say it has nothing to do with Drupal. Translation is still very laborious. So you got to go translate every string of text on the website needs to be translated for every language. And the app sort of puts the pieces in place for that. That's it, though. Yeah. Yeah.
Just curious if you have any apps that use organic groups.
None yet. We've been talking about that. One thing, we just left a meeting this morning. We're already sort of planning post 1.0. So one of the things that is going to happen here, hopefully when we go 1.0, is any new features are going to be done through apps. Organic groups is not on the immediate hit list of like 4 things. The first things we're going to be working on is a much more robust social sharing app. Workflow, because it comes up on all of our public sector sites. We've done it like 30 times now. So we're going to wrap up our best practices for workflow, and that actually is going to be 3 apps, around the Workbench, and then one that's pretty custom to us, built on the Workbench tool stack. And we're working on some other things. But we have been giving we do a lot of platform work, and so we haven't necessarily had to do organic groups, multi-site stuff with OpenPublic, but it is one of the things that we are thinking about. But definitely the space is right for somebody else to contribute. Yeah.
What would be the workflow, very briefly, of course, of creating and adding a new app to your
Yeah, that's great. So good question. If you want to create an app, right now it's a fairly informal process. The technical pieces that go into an app are the modules, any patches that you might find writing your app you would like in OpenPublic. There are some theming things, and then you need to export all the features. So if you're familiar with features, that made sense. If you're not, anything that's a configuration change in Drupal is made in the database. Features allows you to capture those database changes as part of your code. So a lot of what makes this work, like custom content types, theming, stuff like that, is actually correctly architected and captured features that go along with the code and run, basically set all that up, set up the modules, get it working in OpenPublic. Once you do that, if you go read the apps documentation, you basically need to create just like a manifest, basically, of all the modules, the dependencies that your things have. It's basically a text file. And ideally create an icon and stuff, and then you submit it to openpublicapp.com, which is people at Phase 2 right now. And that goes into the official store. The other thing you could do is set up your own store and host that manifest and everything else. The way the app server works is basically an individual Drupal site knows to look in the app store. There's an official OpenPublic app store. If you're a developer, there are instructions about how to run your own local app store within OpenPublic so that you can test. Basically, Drupal site asks the app server, like this actually comes from a server we host, what's the manifest for the app? App says that. You actually still go get all of the code and everything from Drupal.org. So there's no proprietary code. There's no mechanism in the OpenPublic App Store. Phase 2 has no intention of doing it in our App Store. There aren't a lot of hooks in the app server module for like payment or anything like that. So that's pretty much it. You set up basically the manifest and the app server, and that's pretty much it. And then you would submit it. We do a code review on our end, stuff like that. We probably talk to you, and if we think it's good, then we put it up on the server. I shouldn't say store, by the way. I should say app server, so that I don't get sued into oblivion.
What versions of Drupal does it run on?
This RC1, I think, is up to date as part of that. We try and keep it up to date, OpenPublic up to date. Same thing with the apps module. I don't know why I'm looking at the bottom of the screen, but just thinking about another system. So 7, it's whatever core. Drupal 8 is a whole different conversation. OpenPublic and sort of the app server module and the ecosystem around it is built on Drupal 7. Drupal 8, if you're familiar with it, has some different models for some things, and will require a slightly different approach.
So the apps themselves, with an available updates, so can you update apps without having to update OpenPublic as before?
Yeah, you can update, like once the apps are in, you basically update the underlying modules. That's part of the reason for the very loosely coupled system. So the question was, can you update individual apps? Can you update without updating OpenPublic? Yes. Unless for some reason there's a dependency, that would be totally fine. So under the covers, it still updates like a regular Drupal site through modules. So you don't end up chained to any particular tool stack. Yeah.
If you're already running an OpenPublic instance and you have the App Store and there's new apps added to it, is that automatically located in your instance without?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Drupal, it asks to reach it asks when you go. So when we add new apps, they push out. So we pushed out. So the first question, the Lingotech team, I think when they did an app, those guys are really smart. The app manifest and the icon. I think the hardest part was the icon. They did it in an hour or two because they already had a really great module. We already worked with them. It was no big deal. And then they took the extra time to submit some patches on D.O for us. Really nice of them. And yeah, the manifest was, and it was kind of a non-event. Up, like people were like, "Is it live?" I was like, around one testing specific instructions. Please, dear God, do not use it on production, at least without testing, because we did change a lot of the fundamental stuff. We think it's in the specific upgrade instructions comes out. Last time I talked to the developers, they said there may be many.
When you're running making a configuration change that touches an app.
Yeah.
Maybe copy the feature or use feature override.
Do you mean like in other apps, or if you're just like an individual site maintainer?
Yeah, if you're an individual site maintainer or a developer of a single site that's
Yeah.
using these apps.
So yeah, if you're using the apps and you want to kind of do stuff, one of our things is, this goes to Greg's question, there's lots of ways to use OpenPublic. If you're starting to override features locally, you've sort of gone beyond basic, sort of the model we have for OpenPublic, basically. We were just joined by some people. Sorry. Been here the whole time. So, sorry, to go back to your question, if you do it, I think you would probably want to get on the DO issue queue to talk about it. We do that too, so that's how GTA is written, San Mateo. We have individual sites. The big thing when you do a features, so if you commit it and you do a features override, you expect it to go back to the default. You basically need to architect your features so that basically if you make a manual configuration change and you want to preserve it between updates, you're going to have to pull that out to features, have it as a features override, and account for it in your update script. So you're sort of out of the basic. Our hope is that there's less of that with added apps in the apps. Yeah, that is definitely that. So, like if you made your use of apps, turn that on. The apps that work this way right I recommend you turn both. And then the two security apps are also mutually exclusive, and they'll tell you like, hey, you turned on this other one. Don't turn on this one. If you're asking my recommendation, I say use OpenPublic. That was a good question. Yeah.
Use of context, specific, like a specific solution for use case, or is it a legacy thing rather than using like a panel based?
That is a really good question. We like panels too. I will say Open San Mateo uses panels and context together. We could talk about that. So the question was, homepage feature app, and it used Context UI and the context tool stack. It's a legacy thing. I would say at this point we are still using and promoting context in OpenPublic, but we are because there's a lot of things we like about and other resources. So I haven't. We know lots of people who've built sites with panels on OpenPublic. So it is an ad that's there. Probably a future app. Cool. We have maybe a minute or two left for questions. These are all really good questions, but for those of you that are wondering context, like, hey, I'm demoing it right now. It's cool. People like that sort of thing. Possibly one of the greatest debates ever. Should breaking news come above or below the rotator?
Panels versus context.
Panels versus context. There you go. We like both. I will say, if Eric were here, he would have a long thing to say about panels and context together and how they actually work really well together. And if you haven't looked at it, I will say that all of the San Mateo websites use panels and contexts. So people who are recording on the internet won't be able to see my hand, but if you can imagine it, I'm extremely tall, and everything above my hands now, everything basically from the menu up is placed with context and managed that way. Everything underneath that you see on this page is managed with panels until you get down to that blue area. That's all managed with context. And all of the San Mateo sites are that way. Most of the pages you encounter on San Mateo are panels-y, but a lot of the individual ones have no panels. They're all sort of context. So it is possible they can play together live in a production site. It's, cool.